Collective Whisper podcast with Simon King. Okay, hello everybody. I'd like to welcome Dave Joyce from Galway. Dave Joyce was the first Muay Thai instructor in Galway and was a pioneer of the martial art in Ireland. He is a senior representative of the Irish Muay Thai Council. He is also the Irish representative for Sayoc Kali. Welcome to the show, Dave. How are you?
I'm not bad, Simon. Thanks very much.
At the moment, you're feeling a bit under the weather. You have some symptoms, no?
Yeah, unfortunately tested positive for COVID-19 last Wednesday, and then got confirmed. I had the test on Wednesday, got confirmed on Thursday that it was positive. Then, unfortunately, my fiance, same way, she tested Thursday and confirmed she was positive as well on Friday.
Do you think that it was something that you had been, it got to you early, or like you had something you'd contracted from somebody at work, or in the gym, or what? Where you have no idea, I suppose.
No idea, Simon, at all. It's very strange for us because I took my holidays from work very early this year because we had obviously a lot of holidays to take because we'd worked through the whole first lockdown, and we needed to take our holidays, and I wanted to get finished early this year. I also closed the gym quite early. I think it was around the 16th, took my holidays on the 18th. And we live in a very rural area. Our closest neighbour is probably a quarter of a mile away on one side and half a mile on the other side. So we're in a very isolated area. Jerry works in the culinary business, anything from management level right down to, she'd work on a deli counter. But she lost her job in March in the first pandemic. So because she wears double hearing aids, she couldn't work under the circumstances at the moment because with everyone wearing a face mask, she can't lip read what they're trying to order, things like that. So not that there's an abundance of jobs out there. So she's basically self-isolated since March, and since she had everything sorted and prepared for Christmas, so we didn't go out for anything to eat. We don't really drink, so no issue with going out. Our circle was really small, just my son, my fiance, and then my youngest son, who's only 5. I have him on a Wednesday and I have him at the weekends, and that was it. So we would have went out, we'll say, coming up to Christmas, but very little, and it was only for essential shopping. And obviously when we went out, we would have used a mask and we would have used hand sanitizer and things like that. So we're really perplexed as to how we actually contracted it. It's very, very strange. Our circle really small, doing all the things they advise people to do, and yet we still got it. It's very, very strange.
And can I ask you, did you have any cases of COVID in the gym or when you were training the last few months?
No, we really curtailed what we did. Jerry did a COVID course for the club. There was a lot of people saying that they were COVID compliant, and when you looked at the courses they did, they emanated from Australia and New Zealand, and 50% of the stuff wasn't even relevant to Ireland. So it cost a bit of money. They were all free courses. It cost us a little bit of money. I think it was about 50 quid to do this course, but it was all directly relevant to Ireland. The recommendations were all coming from the HSC, and we implemented those straight away. We had closed immediately. We actually closed the night Leo Radker made the announcement of the lockdown. So we just said there's no point in kind of delaying this or procrastinating. We just closed the gym straight away, and we stayed closed. When we reopened, Jerry had the course done in the meantime, and we implemented all those measures. We cut our numbers down. As restrictions got stricter here in Ireland, where there was no contact training, we had to kind of do bag work, basically. Smaller numbers, much smaller class, and people could just work on a bag rather than pad work, obviously, so there was no close contact and things like that. They had to sign in. We had contact tracing, a whole pile of paperwork, and thankfully we'd I think maybe two people possibly may have had to go for a test, but that was outside the club related. One lad from work and one lad, I think a child in the household had tested or had been a close contact to someone. But both of those guys were negative. They didn't have COVID. I don't think. I think one guy went for a test and the other guy didn't need to, and his test was negative.
Dave, do you think, like, I think I had sent you a message earlier and I said to you that I was shocked to see that Ireland was the highest per population with the virus at the moment, and it's quite shocking. I think it's like 1% of the population is infected, and I mean that's really rapidly rising. So what do you think has happened? Do you think that, you know, the steps people were taking in the last few weeks weren't effective enough? Or do you think there was too many kind of private parties and this kind of thing?
Being very honest, Simon, I think an awful lot of people are to blame. People's own personal behaviour is dreadful. Because there's so many asymptomatic people, they feel, well, I don't have it, so I'm fine. And I think it's a very selfish attitude to take, because I think there's a huge number of people that are asymptomatic, but obviously they put the more vulnerable people at risk, and they've been very selfish about it. I also mentioned to my colleagues in work, because we worked through the last lockdown in Ireland, and when we came out in December, I said to the guys that I work with, I said there is going to be a ton of cases in January, because you cannot expect people to come out of a 6-week lockdown, give them 3 weeks to a major holiday here, and expect the numbers not to increase. I mean, you give any big household 3 weeks to prepare for Christmas, you know, and not everybody's going to buy online. Some people just don't do that. So,
No.
you know, they're going to have Christmas shopping to do. They're going to have a lot more food shopping to do than they normally would. So, you know, people's behaviour may have been silly in the sense that they were queuing when they didn't need to. But, you know, I find it hard to blame them when it's a very big celebration in Ireland. And then, thirdly, I think the government were ridiculous. They have played around with what NEFIT has advised them at times and overdid it or underdid it, and they just can't seem to get it right. I think it's ridiculous, to be honest, Simon. I feel very strongly about it that we should have been locking down this island like New Zealand from the outset. But there's evidence to show that even during the first lockdown, there was a large number of flights coming into Ireland. There was no testing. We actually came back from, I'm trying to think, it was late February, one of the lads fought at the last show that we attended was in Scotland, and it was just starting to hit, and the queues to get the plane back to Ireland that the end of February was like quite stark. It was like, whoa, what is going on here? This is kind of crazy. Masks weren't in place or anything at that time, but you know things were starting to kind of really turn a corner that wasn't a good corner. And because those flights kept coming in, you know, it was madness. My fiance's family live in Monaghan, it's right on the border, and one thing, what was ridiculous is we came out of lockdown just as they went into lockdown, and I think it might have been vice versa at one stage
Right.
as well. So, you know, some people just have no discipline at all, and if they're locked down and the minute they get a chance they just don't care, right? Oh, if I can go across the border I can go to a pub, and that means both directions, you know, from the
Yeah.
south to the north, from the north to the south.
Yeah.
So, you know, the fact that there was such intransigence against having a 32 county policy, regardless of the political connotations, we're talking about people's health here, that was a disaster
Yeah.
from the get-go. And I think it's still the case because,
Yeah.
you know, we have to take an all-Ireland approach to this and just shut it down for as long as it takes. I personally think we came back, because I came back to work in I think it was the beginning of June. We had been in a couple of times for emergency calls. We weren't furloughed, we were kind of working from home on standby, so if an emergency came up or something needed to be done, we were called in. But again, this shows up. I live in an area with extremely bad mobile phone reception. We don't have a house phone. We only have mobile phones. The reception is terrible. So a lot of the time when they were trying to contact me, I couldn't be contacted because the calls weren't coming through. And I wouldn't even get a missed call alert sometimes until a day or a day and a half later, which isn't much good when you're called into work. So, you know, this whole pandemic has highlighted a lot of crazy things that are let go.
Yeah, I mean, this is the thing that my kind of words that I like to use, this pandemic, COVID is kind of like this silent assassin because people, as you said, think, oh, I'm fit and strong and I'm healthy and I don't take chances and I'll nip across the border and I'll have a few drinks and I'll do my shopping and it won't affect me if I stay safe. But that's the thing. If you do get any kind of symptoms, the first thing people are doing is thinking, who was I in contact with? Where did this come from? And it's nearly impossible to trace it back. And this is the problem, that it's there, we can see it, but it's doing so much damage and it's just crazy. And I think people, like, I mean, here in Madrid, it was very bad for a few months. It's a bit better now, and they've managed to curtail the number of people dying, which is good. And they've kind of have I suppose when something gets really bad, the experts become more of an expert. Um, but I think now the situation we had in Madrid a few months ago is starting to rear its head in Ireland, and and this is the bad thing. I mean, you're really going to see the effects of it now in January and February with the cold winter, no?
Absolutely, 100% agree. Um, like people's complacency from the start was very poor. I'm sure you remember Des Hubbard from Red Light Records in Eglinton Street, and Des lives in Lombardy. And the funny thing is, apart from me being in Scotland at the end of February, we were in Livigno in Lombardy skiing in the end of January, beginning of February, and things were great there. It was my first time skiing. Jerry loves it, but it was my first time skiing, and it was great there. But within 3 weeks, they were devastated. And I remember Des being online and saying to people, like, you don't realize what it's like here. It's crazy. And people's complacency here was unbelievable. People denying it. It's not that bad. And he was giving us first-hand examples of how bad it was and how difficult it was. I mean, their frontline staff, I'd say those people could be traumatized for years to come with what they faced. It was horrible there, and that was obviously one of the worst places in Europe when the whole thing started.
Dave, let's go back a little bit. Let's go back to your early life. So you were, I'm right, you were born in Galway. You're Merview, aren't you? That's where you were originally came from. Tell us about growing up there and everything.
People laugh because there's a saying with people from the centre of Galway, that you're not a real Galwegian unless you're born within the walls of Galway or grew up with the walls of Galway. And I have very vague memories of growing up in Flood Street. For the first few years of our life, Mum and Dad lived in an apartment there on the top floor. It was Sisk's offices at one stage, and it's part of the Harbour, not the Harbour Hotel. I can't remember. I think possibly the Harbour Hotel, but we used to live on the top floor there, straight across from the Custom House. So we spent the first few years growing up there in the city centre,
Okay.
and then we moved out to Glenina Heights, just next door to Galwegians rugby ground, and it's what,
Yeah.
maybe 2.5, 3 miles maximum from Galway city centre, and people are going, "Why are you moving out to the country? My God, you'll never survive out there." And I can actually remember
Yeah,
Glenina
like you're in
Heights.
the sticks and you're
Yeah, totally. And I can remember at the time, I think there may have been
yeah.
about, there was very few, there may have been only about, there's 54 houses in Glenina Heights. I think there was about half a dozen from my memory when we moved out there. So we were one of the first families to move in there.
Wow. Yeah, because I imagine like Glenina Heights and all around that area there was a lot of new developments, but it was still pretty empty. You're touching the countryside there, weren't you?
We'd say the existing houses, Carol Cushing Road and Quinn Place and Lockman Terrace, all those would have been there, and just the very front there towards the Dublin Road, Glenina was just starting to become a development there, and but obviously it only ended up fitting 54 houses, but I can just remember vague memories of that.
What year did they build the flats in Merview? Was that, do you remember that when you were growing up there?
I can remember. I can remember the Walter Mackin flats. I can't actually think of when they were built, to be honest, Simon. I do remember the play. There was a playground there. there's a creche at there at the moment on that spot. And I remember we used to be there on the way. We used to play there on the way to school and things. So those flats are up. And my grandmother actually lived in it at one stage, in a flat at one stage. But
Oh
she moved
wow,
back
yes.
to go and work because she was a townie at heart and she just loved her own house. So she ended up moving back home. She's a very independent woman
I
anyway.
love it.
So
Yeah. I love it. I love it. Like if you're in Merview, you're not a townie, but if you're in Bohermore, you are. And now, now I mean, it's what 10 to 15 minutes walk, and you're there. It's crazy. It's crazy. When you were, how many was in your family? Was it just you, or was there more kids?
there was six of us. There's six of us in total. Four boys and two girls. Um, so I'm the eldest. Deck is underneath me. Dorena was in the middle of four boys, so she grew up tough. And then there's 20 years between me and my youngest sister, Mia, who's the baby of the family.
Wow, that's a big gap, no?
And I've probably done something similar myself. My eldest is 27 and my youngest is 5.
Wow, wow. Yeah, but that's the way the world is now because there's all types of new relationships and people are having children later as well sometimes. So sometimes you'll have these huge gaps and it's an interesting thing but when you have a 27-year-old and a 5-year-old who are, brothers or half brothers or step brothers or whatever, but it's a funny dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, and a 24-year-old in the middle. So the two older lads have a great relationship with Daniel, so it's really funny to watch.
Yeah, I've seen some of your photos on Facebook there with them, and it's gas. And can I ask you then, like when you were growing up, what kind of stuff did you do besides obviously you got into martial arts and everything, but did you try a lot of sports and try other hobbies as well?
Oh yeah, our family was sports mad, absolutely mad. All of us were. When I consider what my mum went through when we were growing up, she was unbelievable. Um, we were constantly playing my brother Declan. We reckon played on at least 10 teams when he was about 16 years of age. So he played a lot of soccer, he played a lot of rugby, played a lot of Gaelic. He will say he hurled. No, that's that's open to interpretation. He would have been a great hurler. But people say, well, that's maximum 8 teams. Yeah, but he was 16 and he was huge. We've a photograph from, I think it's 1974, a black and white photo. We were under 11 with Bohemians, and I'm sitting in the front, this small little guy sitting on the bench, and I'm the eldest in the family, and Deck is sitting there, and he's like here, and he's head and shoulders over me, both in height and in stature. So he was big, and obviously he was playing minor, and at one stage, Merview Junior C side came down. He would have been just 16, maybe going on 17, and Merview Junior C side came down and asked him to play Junior C as well as minor. So we reckon it's a minimum of 10 teams. But I look at kids now when I teach, and the downside to all that, it's great to be involved in so many teams. And when I say 8, I can qualify that he played rugby, soccer, Gaelic, and hurled a little bit with the Bish. He played soccer with Bows, rugby with Corinthians, and a lot of football with Merview, and a little bit of hurling. So, he had the record there, but by the time he was 23, his knees were shot. To this day, he's
Wow.
huge issues with his knees over it. And, I love seeing kids involved in sport. I don't care what they're playing. As I often say, as long as they're involved in sport, it's fantastic. But I've coached a little bit of rugby in Calasanctus and Norton Moor because my two lads went there, and they're really talented kids. They're in such demand. The soccer team wants them, the rugby team wants them. They may hurl a little, they may play football,
Mhm.
and that's cool. I mean, it's great, but I mean, coaches need to be responsible too. They need to realize the demands that are on kids physically. And the downside of that is I'm looking at kids that I seen went to school with my kids, and they have the same kind of issues that Deck had, just playing too many of the same type of sports, and maybe growing too big too quickly, and they're just shot by the time
Yeah.
they're young guys in their 20s.
Yeah, and there's probably a little bit of selfishness on the part of some coaches because they kind of want the student, or the pupil, to be the best at what they're doing, but they're not thinking that maybe he's doing five other activities, whether it be basketball or taekwondo or whatever. And the thing is, like, especially if you're playing football and you're doing martial arts, for example, there's a lot of pressure on your legs and your knees and your ankles. So you'll always, even I know my wife used to play like semi-professional basketball. She's from Poland, and she used to have lots of injuries on her ankles when she was younger and everything. So you have to grow old with those injuries, and the more sports you do, the more chance of having more of those injuries. No.
Give you an idea how hard it was when I coached with Rob Crane and Dan Maher in Calasanctus. We had a very, very good side with some brilliant young players. Uh, we realised that because we were competing with hurling and soccer as well, it was going to be very hard to get the whole squad together. Now, that squad got to a junior cup final against Sligo Grammar, but we decided we'd train Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It wasn't that we wanted the kids necessarily doing 3 days a week, but we knew we couldn't get everyone at the same time. But I don't think we had the full squad at any stage, even alone. We said to kids, look, as long as you can make 2 of the 3, that's great. If you're playing other sports, 1 of the 3 is fine, but we need you on certain days, because obviously if you're missing a prop, the scrum is not going to perform to the ability it can. If you're missing your out half, there's no one to call plays. Other positions maybe not as bad, but I don't think in all the training sessions we had our full starting 15 at any stage, because there were ties to other sports as well. And we lost that final, and I think a lot of that was just because we never had a full session where we could have everyone working as a unit. So, it puts a lot of demands on kids, and as you said, coaches need to kind of, unfortunately they're human, they're going to be selfish, but it's the kids that are going to suffer, really, not them.
Maybe as we get into a kind of a better world in the future, maybe coaches will look and say, listen, Johnny or whoever, what other stuff are you doing now? And, you bear this in mind when you're training, and, maybe change your training to different nights. But unfortunately, people kind of think of their own entities and what they're doing, and they try to say, oh, well, look, you've trained on Tuesday and Thursday, and try and be there if you can. And kids, I'm sure, are saying to coaches, oh, I've hurling that night and I've rugby on Friday. And and of course the coach is thinking on their behalf, well, as long as you're ready for the grading, or as long as you're ready for the competition, that's just look after yourself. And that's the shame of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I have to hold my own hand up as well. I mean, the parents have a lot to answer for with this as well. I mean, I was small in stature always, and I played rugby from 6 or 7 years of age. My dad set up the juvenile section in Corinthians, and obviously we just loved it. And up to until I was about 14 or 15, I loved rugby. I mean, it was probably more than soccer. I think I preferred rugby. I love soccer as well, but because I was small, and once junior, there was back in those days there was no real junior cup as such, not like it is nowadays. So when we went into the senior squad, it was sink or swim time, and because we were small, it was like, okay, you guys stand over there, and we'll get these guys here, and we were basically just cannon fodder for the big lads. And I regret to this day that I gave up and I just didn't try harder. But you were so small, you weren't going to make an impact, and I gave up rugby at that stage. So then in later years, when my lads started playing rugby, obviously I was selfish as hell. I was living my my rugby career through my lads, and I was pushing them as much as I
Living
can.
vicariously through there.
Absolutely. So, I can understand it from both perspectives, being selfish and wanting to see your kids do good because maybe you didn't take the opportunities that were there to you. But, it is human nature. We just need to let them live their lives.
Yeah, you were saying that time, because I remember I used to play rugby with Corinthians for a while. I think about a year, maybe 7 or 8 months. I can't remember. But that time we used to train in the, oh, it's years ago now. We used to train in there was like an old hotel across from the sports ground there. Do you know what? That's where they used to have their changing rooms there. Ardna Craig, yeah. And I always remember that because It'd be, I don't know now, were you training there at that time? I can't remember. I remember a few of the lads, but we used to go up with Jimmy Glynn, Jimmy Glynn from Corofin. Did you know Jimmy? He died not so long ago. Yeah, and I trained with Eugene Hessian. Yeah, I trained with Eugene Hessian in Corofin there. That Eugene got me into it because he was playing with Corinthians for a bit. But I remember, yeah, going up to that cold dressing room underneath the hotel, and the thing was they used the bar and the hotel as well as the social kind of place, and going to out the god end arse end of nowhere, playing teams from Malahide and everything in the freezing weather.
Yeah, we were really lucky, and there's not many people that remember Erna Craig. There's, I think it's apartments across from the city council that's there now. But
Yeah,
the abiding memory I have is obviously, as you said, Simon, we'd get togged out in Erna Craig in the dressing rooms there, and then you jogged down to the sports ground, and the sound of all the studs jogging down is
the clip clopping. Yeah. Yeah, it's like an army. I remember that. Yeah, the clip clopping down the road. You know what I mean? And there could be ice on the road or everything, and fellas falling and everything.
and Tom Holland's sheep all over the side pitch, so you were guaranteed to come out green, and it wasn't green from the grass.
Yeah, that's gas, isn't it? That's gas. That's it. That's for me an old Galway memory. I always remember, even now, if I walk by those apartments, I always look in, and I think you used to go in the gate down the hill, and I always remember that. It always sticks out in my mind. It's an old part of Galway. So listen, Dave. Tell us. So when did you start martial arts, and like, how did you get into it? What was your kind of motivation?
Well, I suppose like a lot of guys in my generation, it was definitely Bruce Lee. Um, there was a karate club in Murphy Community Centre, which was probably Murphy Community Centre, probably about 400 or 500 yards from my house, and I remember going up to see it after having seen Bruce Lee, and I kind of just I just liked the fluidity of what we seen in the movies, which 50% of that might have been really. When I looked at karate, I just thought, no, that's not the same thing, and just never got the bug from that. And it was a couple of years later when a kung fu system came to Galway first, and I went down to see. And once I'd seen that looks more like what Bruce Lee did, and that was me hooked
Yeah,
straight away.
yeah, 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 yeah,
Nice. They
yeah.
came down, did a demonstration. There was no opportunity to train. They just came down, did a short demonstration for about 20 minutes or so, and then looked for people to sign up. And it was in another old building that's subsequently gone. It's the Revive Cafe now. It was O'Neill's Hotel at the time. I think it was an insurance business at one stage just across from Roach's stores. And even Roach's is gone. It's Debenhams now. But they started off
Yes,
there and
yeah.
then moved down to St. Patrick's Hall. But the minute I seen the demo, that was it. And it was quite expensive to train at the time. This is 1981. I think it was about £20 a month to train. And of course, I went back to mum and dad and said, "Listen, I want to do this." And they were going, "How much?" And they were kind of go, "Oh," but they did. They gave me the money,
Yeah.
and I started the very first night, and been in it from the scratch ever since that very first night. The end of January 1981, never forget it. I was still in school and all.
Wow. So like literally it's 40 years ago this month, no?
Yeah, 40 years ago this month.
I was going to say it's funny how you say the whole Bruce Lee thing. I mean, Bruce Lee is always such an iconic character, and I remember, my brother Charlie, you know Charlie as well, and Charlie was doing a bit of taekwondo, and I always wanted to do it, but we were at that time we were living in Kildare, and he had done it for a few months. But I remember I had, the old window fan over the door, like the glass over the door, and always my objective was trying to kick the top of the door and falling on your arse and everything, but getting more flexible all the time. But and watching the Bruce Lee movies and having the Bruce Lee, I used to go into Chivagos and buy the Bruce Lee posters and put them on the wall, and he was so iconic. I mean, even if you didn't watch all of his stuff, all you had to do was watch one or two movies and you were kind of hooked on the whole idea of it.
Absolutely.
And tell me, Dave, so you got into Kung Fu. Was that Was that a particular style of kung fu that you were learning at the time, like, or were they mixing different styles of kung fu?
Um, they started was just completely kung fu. In subsequent years, we found out that what we were actually learning in Ireland was really watered down. The guy was an innovator. His name was Daniel K. Pye. Um, he had trained
Mm,
under Ed Parker, the famous Kempo guy. He'd crossed paths
the
with
Kempo
Bruce
guy,
Lee and
yeah.
things. And so he taught kind of, it was very strange. It was an eclectic mix of kind of like some Japanese karate, some Kempo karate, and then some Kung Fu as well. Um, I really look and I'm dubious now when I look back and see real Kung Fu systems which we subsequently trained in, and know that it was really not really good. I think it was really watered down.
Mm.
Um, I don't think it was authentic at all. And certainly the variation that we got in Ireland was very different to what they were training in the States.
Yeah, I think that's it though, because for me, obviously, I remember when I started training in karate in Tuam, and I remember the first time I went in with one of the lads from my school, and he gave up within a week, and then I kind of stopped doing it, and then I came back a few months later, but I went to another karate club that was in Tuam, and I stayed there then, and I went on and trained with them for a good few years. And the thing is, for me though, you know, as you said, the I was doing Shotokan karate, and it's a very rigid style, and low stances and everything, and you kind of, that's the thing as a martial artist, when you're doing martial arts you do question what you're being taught. I mean, I had a fabulous instructor, Sayoc Kali, and she was amazing, but it's not so much the instructor, sometimes it's the association and the system and the style. And for me, the big kind of gripe I have against a lot of karate now is that it's sport karate, because I remember learning from these martial arts books, and I had this fantastic book. I still have it actually, and it was like a mixture of jujitsu and karate, and it was very. I loved the movements, and it was only, a book is only pictures, but for me, I found that the sport karate kind of, it used to annoy me, because I'd be thinking, yeah, but I want to learn in this situation, what do you do, and what's in that situation. I wanted to learn more the traditional defense and what they used, whereas a lot of the time you're going for points, and you're, scoring, and then katas and everything. So, I mean, I think a lot of people lose favor with some martial arts over this watering down, don't they?
Yeah, oh, totally. Um, I think it's a huge thing, and it's funny in a lot of ways because on one extreme you have the guys like you're saying that are pushing sport karate, and on the other extreme, then you have MMA guys who are going, that's all traditional rubbish, and it doesn't have anything to do with the real world. And there's
Mm.
merit in both, but it depends what you're looking for. To me, a sport is still a sport, and this is my big issue I have with a lot of MMA coaches, that they want it to be all things to all
Mm.
people. Absolutely, it's a phenomenal combat sport, but you know, the famed street is a different place, and the way I try to put it to people
Mm.
is it's not comparing things, but it's just there's no rule set on the street, and if you put it in a fighting context, you don't have to worry about the corner man picking up the stool and hitting his opponent's corner with the stool.
No.
That's the difference with the street. So, I think both sides there are not being genuine in what they're saying to people. But, um, martial arts is there to enjoy. To me, I've always looked at martial arts as like going into a Chinese restaurant and looking at the array of dishes that's there. And there's no way in the world you can convince me that chop suey is better than curry if curry is my dish. And that's not to stop us trying lots of other
Yes.
dishes as well. Some complement each other,
Yes.
some
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
You might try two different dishes that don't complement each other and you don't feel good after doing the same thing with martial arts. Some martial arts work great together, one will help the other, and others are just. It's not that you can't do them, but you're not adding anything to your skill set because the principles may be contrary to each other.
Yeah, well, I remember because I trained with you for a while and then I moved out of Galway and I didn't continue. But I remember I always enjoyed when I was training with you was you had a very open mind towards other martial arts and you were teaching a few different styles there. And for me, I thought that was great because of course, in later years, MMA came around, and a lot of MMA practitioners had a foundation in either karate, kung fu, different styles, jujitsu. But to have that foundation is a great thing because you can build upon something, and then you can mix them and match them and do whatever. And what I always liked about your club there and your teaching was it was open doors kind of to that. And I remember coming from Tuam, there was me and I think it was one or two other lads, and we went training in your club. And another older karate guy said to us, "You're going up to the kung fu club training, but you're doing karate." And I was like, "Yeah, but we want to go up and we want to test out things and see things, and because." That's the thing. You have to have an open mind and like say, "Oh, what's that? Krav Maga. Oh, Jiu-Jitsu, BJJ." It's nice to try these. And I know myself, for me, after I got my black belt, and when I got it, I always felt like it'd be a greater achievement. But as a lot of people find out, you're just really starting on the road to somewhere. And that I think it was that year or whatever, I had an encounter in Galway City where I was attacked, me and my girlfriend at the time, by three guys coked up with knives. And I remember in that heat of the moment, the karate helped me, but it also showed me that there's so much more I had to learn, and that these things, these systems aren't always valuable on the streets. And I had worked on doors, and I could handle myself. But the thing is, when you're in a situation when people have knives and you've nothing, and even if you did, you're not a trained knife fighter, and people are on hard drugs or something that changes their mentality, you fear for your life. And these moves you've learned, you can freeze, and you don't put everything into practice. You don't put all the stuff you've learned into practice. So that kind of opened my mind to the whole idea of you have to mix and match. You have to use what's effective, but it's all about the mentality too, isn't it?
The mindset is critical to any martial art at all. Whether you're talking about combat sports, if your mindset isn't right, it doesn't matter how good your training is physically, how good your preparation is, how good your conditioning is. If your mindset isn't right, you're not going to win. On the other side of the coin, your mindset for the street just has to be exactly right. You have to understand the situation well. You have to be able to read what's going on. And if you don't have that, things aren't good. And the chances of us coming across a life or death situation are very, very slim. That doesn't mean it won't happen. I can remember, like you said, Simon, people kind of say, "Oh, why were you guys doing things like that? Ireland was never that dangerous back in those days." But I remember a guy,
Mm.
probably in the 80s, and he went on holidays and he was mugged and he was stabbed and he was hurt quite bad in the stabbing. And we spoke to him when he came back. Now, this is way before I did any weapons training. And he said, of course,
Mm.
and it just brings up what you said earlier. He had this guy try to mug him, and he only had certain amount of money, and he was on holidays. If that money was taken, he didn't know how he was even going to get home. So obviously, he tried to stand up for himself and
Yeah.
fight back. But when the guy produced the knife, he tried to kick it out of his hand and got stabbed in the leg. So, his mindset for that situation was just, he had the willingness, but he didn't know how to deal with that situation. And that's what people need to understand. Mindset is vital.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when you have the correct mindset, it's not just about your fighting ability; it's your decision making as well. There's going to be times when, oh, this is not a good time to fight. You may have companions with you, you
Mm.
may have kids with you, and that may not be the right time to make a stand. You may have to hand over everything you have, but do you put the monetary value on what you're handing over above your family? And likewise, there's other times that you can hand over everything you have, and these guys aren't satisfied and they want more. What are you going to do? You're going to protect your family. So it's about understanding things, and having the correct mindset is vitally important.
Yeah, I remember that situation because I think I was around 30 at the time, and we were just coming home from a party, and it was like, 3 in the morning or whatever, and coming down Bohermore there, and quiet streets, and it was basically one of those situations. I stopped in at the side. That is it Blake's Lane, or that one there, the small little laneway. I think it's in Bohermore, and I stopped in there to have a piss, and my girlfriend was standing out at the end of it, just there. She was only like 20 meters away from me with her bag, and as these fellas went by, they grabbed the bag, and of course, my first reaction was, zipped up, ran after them. And when I got up to them, I said, "Give me the bag." And the guy was like, "Well, what? This is our bag." And I was like, So I grabbed the bag off him. And as I turned to walk away, and next minute, one of them called me. He said, "Hey, you fucker, come here." And next minute, I turned around and he had a knife out. And the other two guys pulled knives. And I thought, fuck, I don't know. To be honest, I don't know how I would have dealt with one knife, but to have the three of them with knives. And I knew straight away they were coked to their eyes, And my first thing was, I have to get out of here. But at that stage, I was a little away from her. So I actually did the smartest thing I think I've ever done. I crossed the road with them kind of moving towards me, but I was getting them away from her. And as like you said, you're trying to kind of think of the situation on your feet and where to go, what to do. And I led them towards what do you call the bar in Bournemore? What's the bar there? Is Crows, yeah, one of these, and went towards the bar. And as I was there, I thought, okay, I have a hope here, and your adrenaline's in, and the fear and everything. And I turned, and as I turned, one was swiped me, and I did the only martial art move. The only thing I did was I did a back kick, and I kicked the guy in the chest, and I knocked him. And as they kind of went to help him, I ran. And I thought, I have to get them away from her. So I ran, I jumped down the back wall, and I didn't realize there was like a 20-foot drop. I ran down, came up around the estates, and managed to get to her. But it seemed to me like, 20 minutes, but it was probably only 2 minutes to get around to her. But it's like your life flashes before your eyes. But I always remember I managed to get to her, and I could hear them shouting up the road at us and everything. We got out of there, and we just got out, went back towards the city and looked for a cop. And of course, it's like when you're looking for the law, they're never around. And we were very lucky though. I mean, it could have ended far worse. And the thing was, it was only like someone's bag. They took a bag, and you could have been brave and say, okay, here's my best Bruce Lee moves, and I'm going to put everything into practice. But you end up, with 16 stab wounds in you, and this is the problem. And I'm so thankful that we got away. But like you said, the best situation is to get out of there and to get the person you're with out of there safely, and to try and diffuse the situation. But it's not a case of talking sometimes, because these people won't listen if they have a mindset of doing harm.
Absolutely, and people don't understand that there's just bad people out there. Chances of running across them might be small, but they're people that don't have a sense of right or wrong, and they don't care. And I think that's the biggest thing that people don't take into account. There's just some people out there that are evil and want to do bad things.
For people, I suppose, for anybody, when they're doing when they have a situation and they have some sort of training, I think the way to look at it is that if the training helped you a little bit and got you off that situation, you don't need to be victorious. You just need to be alive.
No, absolutely not. I remember I was very young at the time. I was teaching, but I was probably only in my mid-20s, and I was asked to teach self-defense to a women's group in Merview. And those ladies were amazing for that time. I suppose I was a bit of a strange case for them as well, because I had like very forthright views and things like that, and I've always would regard myself as being very open. And so they were kind of quite surprised that this young guy could have kind of an open mind on certain subjects. And I remember saying to them, look, I says, if you never get anything out of this, I says, at least have a good understanding of what you're trying to achieve. If you never want to do martial arts, that's fine. I said, but know how to get yourself out of trouble. And I remember one of the ladies on that in the subsequent years she took what I said to heart and she started running. She learned to run because it's laughable in a lot of ways. The big martial arts advice is if someone produces a knife or if there's superior rods, run. Don't get into the competition. Run. Yeah, but unless you run for a living, or unless you run as a pastime, most people aren't going to run very far. And if you run away from trouble, sometimes the trouble will catch up with you. So this is what I explained to them.
Yeah.
I said, look, if you never follow on from this, but if conflict isn't your thing, but you think running is, well then learn to run. And I used to see her running out on the roads regular, and she took that lesson to heart. So it was about decision making, and the decision she made was very, very good. Nothing to do with conflict or martial arts, but learned that if I have to run, I'm going to be able to run. They're going to have a job to keep up with me.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Because I think as martial artists and anybody kind of who works in, like, I know you've worked in the door a long time as well, and I did door work for a couple of years. And the thing about that it taught me was it's not about what you know, it's about how you read the situation and how you can diffuse a situation. And the thing about it is, I think the clever people in a situation where they're in danger, it's how quickly their mind works. And for these guys who train in the military for these kind of situations, and where their lives are at risk, it's how quickly they can evaluate and use minimal force but still get the job done, or get the hell out of there, isn't it?
People, it's funny, this controversy about the guy in Dublin that was shot. I mean, the whole operation was handled very badly from the start, but in the context of, regardless of how the situation was handled, but you're asking a guy to make a decision there in a split second. If he's, why didn't they just swing him, shoot him in the arm or shoot him in the leg? Apart from the fact they obviously know very little about firearms, when they make suggestions like that, you're asking people to make a split second decision, and it just shows you how little people think about these things, that they think it's just, well, that guy could possibly stab my colleague, so I just need to shoot him in the arm. It shows you people aren't living in the real world a lot of the time.
Yeah, because it's crazy. I've never really trained in firearms or anything, but I remember reading one thing once. I used to always be thinking, why do the American cops always have to shoot the guys in the chest or the back or wherever? Why can't they give them 2 leg shots or whatever to deflect them? But the thing about it is, what I realized was, through reading, that a lot of the center mass, like where they have to shoot, is the easiest place to hit, because a lot of the time shooting at the leg and the arms, they miss, and in that second that they miss, someone could be dead.
Just because someone's shot and may ultimately die, it doesn't mean they haven't the capacity to still injure others or kill others before they die. So that's why, winging someone or shooting them in the arm. The other factor as well, I laugh when I tend to see this, because I've had a lot of good fortune to train with very experienced military guys and law enforcement guys. But when you try to shoot someone in the arm or the leg, there's a good chance that they'll miss the target completely, and that ricochet or that shot that misses could end up having devastating impact on somebody else.
Yeah.
Or, so people don't understand, like as you said, center mass is they give people the opportunity to not escalate things, and when they do, they have to make that decision there and then straight away. It's not something that can be evaluated or thought about. It's a split second decision that has to be made.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So for you guys now, I mean, obviously with the Kali, and you do you still do the Penchak Salat? Do you do that as well, or what styles do you mainly train in now?
Well, I suppose that's when you mentioned that earlier about training, Sam. I suppose that's what my life's journey has been. Is I've always suppose I've been searching for something. Like I seen karate, go, no, that's not what I want. Seen kung fu, wow, this is it. This is what I want to do. Starts training in that,
Yeah.
and then after a few years, we started doing some Thai boxing with Master Toddy, and I was going, man, this is pretty cool.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Master Toddy.
And then
Is Master Toddy still alive?
very much so, yeah. I haven't kept up to date with what he does now, but the amazing thing about that guy is the vast majority of Muay Thai instructors in Europe, not just in Britain and Ireland, have probably some lineage going back to him in some way or another. I mean, his influence was crazy for a guy that was just running a club in Manchester. His roots spread throughout Europe, and there's people in France and Holland that have ties to him. I remember a Bulgarian guy. He's probably my age now, and I was in my early 20s, and he was training away in the club, small, stocky guy, and I presume he may have put back to Bulgaria at some stage. So his influence was huge. It was all over Europe, but um, that Spartan was completely different to the kind of old point stuff we referred to earlier. I was going, wow, I really want to try this. So
Mm.
then I started kind of Thai boxing, and I loved that and still do. Um, Not long after that, then I did a seminar in Filipino martial arts, and I was kind of, whoa, hold on a minute, this is different. This is weapons. This is cool. So I wanted to experiment with that, and that was around 87, and see, that was one of the ways that I moved to London basically in 89, and I wanted to fill up my time. Obviously, needed to work to survive over there, but the economy here was really bad at the time, so it was an opportunity to just try something different for a year. And I set myself about a year approximately. Ended up being about 8 months, not a year. But I said, right, while I'm there, I'm going to train as much as I can. I was training Thai boxing. It's not that I couldn't have learnt more Thai, but I wanted to experiment with other stuff. So I had trained with Nino Bernardo, who was a famous Wing Chun practitioner. And even his background was amazing. His instructor was Wang Sheng Lung, who was Bruce Lee's instructor. Most people think Yip Man taught Bruce Lee, but Yip Man did
Yeah,
teach Bruce Lee, but his senior, Bruce's senior, was Wang Chung Lung, and he was Nino's instructor.
yeah,
But what was unique is Nino was training under Dan Inosanto at the time, and it was the Filipino arts that I wanted, and I loved that. But that was, I think there was
yeah,
one night a week of that, and I wasn't too pushed on doing Wing Chun, but I said, no, I'll do it because it suits me. And there was my choices then were Bob Breen's Academy, which was going through a big Thai boxing phase. I had just fought Thai and things like that, so I was going, no, I'm looking for something else. And that's where I met Richard DeBoards and wanted to do CLAT. So again, being exposed to all this stuff gave me kind of, wow, this is amazing. There's a whole world here. Later on, then I didn't have an instructor, and I didn't know where I was going. So we used to go to Dan DeSanto seminars, and it, I mean, I liked JKD, but there was a lot of it that I didn't want to do. It was the weapons that had me intrigued at this stage. So
that that's a question I have for you, because obviously, you've seen Dan and Santo in the movies, working alongside Bruce Lee and learning from Bruce Lee. But I always kind of felt that even though he kept the legacy of JKD alive, and he kept Bruce Lee's kind of words coming out, it was a different style. It was Jeet Kune Do, but it was kind of to Dan Inosanto's methods. I mean, so it probably was a bit different to what people perceived it to be, no?
well, there's three different types of JKD. I can't remember all the names. There's original JKD, which would have been like there's three phases of Bruce, and they're the three phases. But Dan DeSantos with Jeet Kune Do concepts. That's the one that he was renowned for, and he was left that legacy by Bruce. Certainly the others are relevant, but it's on a progression. I mean, I don't get hung up about it, but what appealed to me was the JKD concepts, because um, they had an open mind. They took on board anything, and they followed a lot of Bruce's influences in what he did. Like Muay Thai and diverse CLAT, and now currently like with Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and things like that. I mean, I was speaking to someone recently, and Dan Santos in his 80s now. He teaches all over the world. There was an interview actually that was on Facebook, and although he's in his 80s and he's a full schedule of teaching all over the world, he still goes into classes himself and studies in a class in jiu-jitsu and things like that. So he's a phenomenal man in that respect.
That's an interesting thing, because recently I was looking at, you kind of think to all these masters and, you know, yogis and all these kind of people involved in spiritual and martial arts. and you kind of think, oh wow, is that guy still alive? That's why I was curious, because I remember buying the martial arts magazines, and you'd always see Master Toddy in them and everything. And I remember then when I trained with you, you'd be talking about Master Toddy. And so I was thinking he must be pretty old, because when we were doing the Shotokan, we used to have Hirokazu Kanazawa, who was kind of legendary in Japan for his karate, And now I was looking there recently, and I think he died recently, but he was pretty old. I think so. I'm not sure. I have to check. But then I was looking at the other, what's his name? Oh, I was trying to think there. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I trained for a while with Josie Murray up in Donegal, and I attended a few seminars with Carly Gracie, and so there's a lot of these like old martial art masters. Some of them are still around, but now they're very old. But they're probably trying to train as effectively as they can now.
Dan Santoff tells the story of a guy called John Acosta, who was a famous Filipino martial artist, and he was very, very elderly in the final years. Well, I'll never forget what Dan Santoff said. Like, he'd come out and he'd go to move, but the minute he picked up the stick and started moving, this fluid guy just suddenly came alive, and the difference in his movement once he started moving around was unbelievable. Same way, I trained with a guy called Paul de Tours, a Silat master, and he was the same way. The seminar was held in Bob Breen's Academy in London, and because he was a JKD guy, there's different systems that would be more relevant at certain times, and they were going through a big Muay Thai phase. So, and I was doing a lot of Muay Thai at the time, so you had all these young, fit, really sharp guys, lean and really, really fit. And here's this small, fat Indonesian guy with a little bit of a belly and chain smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee. And he was throwing people left, right, and centre with like absolute ease. I was going, what is going on here? Maybe these guys are just making him look good. So I thought the only way to find out
Yeah.
if this guy's any good is make sure that you're the crash test dummy. So I said, sir, I didn't understand
Yeah.
that. Can you show me that again? And, and I'm on the floor and whoa, what the hell happened there? And I can guarantee I wasn't being compliant. But he said, look, if we're going to stand toe to toe and do a boxing match, I'm going to lose. He said, it's not all about standing toe to
Yeah.
toe with a young fit guy. So yeah, these guys know where it's at.
Yeah, it's funny because when you see that, obviously, with whether it be Aikido or Jiu-Jitsu or any of these things, when any kind of martial artist does demonstrations, there's a certain amount of choreography because they're trying to keep the other practitioners safe, and they're a team and they're not trying to hurt each other. So some spectators and some skeptics will look on and say that's not real and that's rehearsed, and that's because a good example was, do you remember that George Dillman? You remember him? He's an American guy, and he used to have like the dim mac touch kind of thing. And so and then he kind of, I think he was proven to be a fraud, obviously, then, because the great thing about with all these martial arts converging, whether it be into MMA or into the internet, was that sometimes a guy would walk in and say, I want to challenge your style, and pretty soon, if the instructor wasn't up to it, he could be embarrassed in front of his students. And I mean, that happens a bit now with the BJJ, where some big wrestler walks in and wants to, challenge the instructor and see what he's made of. And most of the time he'll lose. But if you have a fake style and something that's not effective and claims to do all these things, you could be on your ass pretty soon if it doesn't work, no?
Absolutely. I hosted a seminar with a CLET instructor, Stephen Benitez, at one stage, and when he came to the seminar, we were chatting after. He says, how many times have you been challenged, Dave? And I was, what? And he says, how many times have you been challenged? And I said, no, never. No one's challenged me. And he says, really? And he couldn't understand this because he'd been challenged countless times in his school, and that was in London. I said, no, it doesn't happen here. I was really surprised at it. I suppose the naivety and innocence of.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because even when you watch, obviously, The Way of the Dragon, The Big Boss, all these movies, the whole point is the rival schools, because they want the good practitioners to come to them, and they want the good students. And if another a club opens, they feel threatened by it and everything. So yeah, I'm sure in the past it happened an awful lot, and whether it happens as much now, I don't know. So come here, let me talk about, like you were saying there, about like MMA in Ireland, and like the evolution of martial arts in Ireland. How do you see it? How it's going, or do you think MMA is taking a lot of students away from all the other styles, and that it's kind of top dog in Ireland now?
Oh, I would think so. I think that I think they lose the plot a small bit and run away with themselves a little bit and think that they're going to completely take over. But I don't think that's the case. I mean, Taekwondo and Karate are still huge. They're still massive, and I don't think that's really going to be affected because I think people will always want to train that way. Um, I think there's some phenomenal MMA guys out there, both instructors and fighters, and obviously on the like with everything, you have the likes of the McGregors, which are just, as far as I'm personally concerned, are just so bad for all martial arts. Um, but
Yeah.
the evolution, I think, again, it may sound contradictory, but because of his influence, I think MMA is extremely strong in this country. But like with all things, things go through phases. MMA is always going to be here now. Um, I think there's a lot of bad things about it as well. The fact that people that don't have a particular background can do it so easily. Most martial artists in the early days of MMA came from a solid background, whether they were a judo guy or a boxing guy, and they had a solid base in that. My problem with a lot of the newer MMA clubs is guys don't have that solid background. Now, obviously, I'm not saying they should only have one. That's not what I'm saying at all. But when you're kind of doing a little bit of stand up, a little bit of groundwork, a little bit of wrestling, that's not the same level. And the funny thing is, a lot of these same MMA guys would give out about JKD and say, they're a jack of all trades and a master of none because they're only touching on certain areas. That can certainly apply to them as well because there's not an awful lot of people that have the time to do an in-depth study in martial arts. And for to be a complete MMA guy, you're looking at least three. You have to have a solid background in stand-up. You have to have a good Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or some kind of groundwork. And unlike when I did MMA, you need to wrestle. Back in, people say to me, when we trained, I didn't care about the wrestling range because there was no wrestlers in Ireland.
When you were doing the MMA, when you were training, it was the Gracies. It was Valatudo, wasn't it? The other name.
Yeah, yeah, and we, we didn't worry about wrestling because we weren't too concerned. If someone took you down, you relied on your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They weren't like wrestlers that could hold you down. So I suppose it was lucky at that time. You just needed stand up in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Nowadays, you need to be able to wrestle. Wrestling is a huge component of it. So I think that's a good thing because it's introduced something else as well. Um, but there's no shortcuts. Professional MMA is a huge other ball game. Um, the skill levels and the discipline and the level of dedication that's needed is massive.
Yeah, I think what it is, probably when it came around first, and you had someone who was maybe a boxer or a wrestler, or a karate guy or kung fu guy, and they had a particular strength or a skill set, maybe good with their legs, and the thing was, nowadays guys are going into an MMA gym, and they're being taught like the basic fundamentals of each style and different styles. But what's happening is that, for a lot of these guys, maybe then they have a fight where they're facing a really strong grappler or a really strong kicker or puncher, and maybe that's where they're losing out because, as you said, it's very hard to combine everything into a class, isn't it? I mean, if I came to you and said I want to learn how to kick, wrestle, grapple, punching, boxing all in one class. It's a lot to do, and you kind of, the great thing about martial arts is if you come from karate or kung fu, your legs are pretty good, and then if you come from boxing, your arms and your hands are good. So you just combine those elements together, but it's after years of training.
Yeah, yeah. Um, some fighters, their own natural ability, they can make up for deficits in other areas by having that better skill set. But certainly for instruction, and that's my fear is when it comes to people instructing that they need to have solid backgrounds. They can't, and they have to be honest about where they lack. You know, it takes a lifetime to do any one martial art, let alone minimum of two or three, and that's where I fear that the standards can drop in terms of people just kind of wanting to do whatever is the least amount they can do. I mean, there's so much training to have to be done on a physical level as well. Your conditioning needs to be so good. You know, it's nearly like full time training.
Yeah. Do you see as well, if you have a lot of younger people learning like MMA and specifically Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and, taking people to the ground, do you see that having an impact on how street fights kind of change? Because, one time the two fellas might stand up and have haymakers, but now you're getting people body slammed to the ground and, so I don't know, maybe it's more effective in the sense of not getting injured, but maybe more people will get injured because of those kind of fights.
It's great. That's a great question, Simon. Yeah. One thing that's I think no, I don't want to make it sound like I'm blaming MMA, but definitely the influence of what they're seeing. People may have no skills, but they see something, and you know, maybe you don't see guys rolling around the floor grappling in a street fight, but certainly one thing that's it popped up in videos all over the world is guys being slammed on the ground. When you do that on a concrete ground, that's devastating. Like, and that's a big influence. You know, depending on the context, it can be a good or a bad thing.
Yeah, because the thing is, in a lot of those cases where you see, let's say, a martial artist defends himself or kicks someone in the head, sometimes it's not the kick in the head that kills him, it's when his head hit the pavement, So the thing is, I think if somebody's been body slammed to the ground on a footpath at night, 12 or 3 in the morning, I mean, probably it's not the technique that's killing them, it's the head knocking off the ground. And maybe if two boxers stood up on the street, he might knock him out, but maybe his friends will catch him. But the problem is when you do like sambo wrestling or BJJ and you're pinning or slamming someone to the ground, maybe there's more reasons why someone could get hurt, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And people need to realize that I often say I've students in college, and I keep telling them and remind them that you don't always have to fight. There's times you're just better off not to fight. And like I say to them, you may go out with the best intentions in the world, but you hit someone, they fall, they smash their head open. You could be facing a very serious charge, even though in the start of this thing you were the person, if you want to say, in the right. So there's consequences for everything, and there's other times you may not want to act, and that could be to your detriment. You could be the one that ends up in hospital, or the other thing is
Yeah.
people don't have to die for it to be absolutely devastating. You can get paralyzed in a fight over something
Yeah.
stupid, and for some people that's their life over. If they're a physically active outdoor person and they're paraplegic after a bad incident, well, to them that's their life over. So it may not be death as such, but in their mind, it's as good as.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Dave, I'm not going to keep you too much longer, but I just want to ask you, let's say, for you through your life now, like how has martial arts changed you spiritually? I mean, how do you feel? I don't want to go into the old cliche of it's made you more disciplined and this kind of stuff, but like spiritually, as you've kind of been training in different styles, and now obviously you're a teacher and I would say an ambassador for martial arts, and do you feel that spiritually it's changed you a lot?
Oh, definitely. Since I started training Sayoc Kali, that was probably, I'd like to think I've had all these brainwave are light bulb moments throughout my martial arts life, but definitely Sayoc Kali is the one that's been massive, been absolutely huge. A friend of mine, I didn't know what it was. I never knew what the movie The Hunt was. A friend of mine said to me, "There's a seminar coming up in Birmingham in 2004, 2003," and he said it's in Sayoc Kali, and I was going, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, it's the stuff they did in the movie The Hunter." I don't think I'd seen that movie.
Mm.
So he said, "Look, just trust me, come along, you'll enjoy it." And I did, and that was probably the most single moment where I was just absolutely blown away.
That's the movie with Benicio del Toro and what's his name, Tommy Lee Jones, and it's some great fight scenes.
Yeah, and since that, it's just been it's just been a massive, monumental journey since I trained in it, and definitely is something that's changed me, and definitely changed me far more for the better, better father, better partner, better martial artist. It's been Sayoc Kali. Spiritually, absolutely, it's changed my outlook on everything, every aspect of my life. It's made me want to be a better everything, better father, better martial artist. Um, it's very difficult to quantify or to explain how much, but definitely I would say I've become more spiritually, and a lot of it down to that.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little about it because obviously I've seen the Silat and stuff before, and you know what's really interesting, the fact in the Silat and then the Eskrima, but it's funny because in Spain here they call fencing, which we call fencing, they call it Esgrima. So it's kind of confusing because it's more like fencing, where Eskrima is different, isn't it?
Well, this is where there's a big, huge debate in Filipino martial arts. It's known under three names: Eskrima, Arnis, or Kali. Now, that's been an ongoing debate for a large number of years and caused a lot of controversy and things like that. But the most accurate um, explanation I have for it is Eskrima and Arnis are Spanish words, and Spain
Mm,
conquered the Philippines, so to a lot of native
mm,
Filipinos, they don't accept that as the name of their mother art, and that's why they refer to it as Kali. Now, the Philippines is a huge place. There's thousands of islands, half them uninhabited, but from north to south, there's three different regions between Luzon, Viziers, and Mindanao. So the influences are massive, and the differences are massive. There's like even the language, the national language, isn't necessarily spoken by everyone. So you're going to get a lot of
mm.
differences of opinion. But Cawley to me is what the art is called.
Yeah, and so how then when you compare, let's say, you know, Chinese and Japanese weapons training, you know, like let's say Japanese with the bow, the staff, the sai, all of these things, how did they come from a similar place, the Filipino martial arts? Like were they all did they all because you know for years they'd say, oh, you know, China and Japan obviously were at war, and karate and kung fu had elements of the same styles and the you know the empty hand training. But did Filipino martial arts come from Japan or China in any way, or was it always its own thing?
Well, that's again the history. The history of Filipino martial arts is very, very hard to be very specific about because it's so huge, and some of it is dependent on oral history. Some of it there's very little written history, and then you can go down the line of a lot of their culture was destroyed when the Spaniards invaded the Philippines. People don't realize Dan Santos' book is quite good on Filipino martial arts. One of the ways they say they kept the martial arts and the language alive was the what looked like tattoos were basically a lot of the time the alphabet. Uh, what looked like exotic
Okay,
dances were actually the equivalent of forms or katas or patterns, whatever you want to call them. So
like
they had
capoeira or something. Yeah.
yeah, so obviously when you lose, written history, like what's happened in Ireland with a lot of our records, then you're reliant on oral, and sometimes that history isn't accurate. So obviously, the Philippines is a melting pot. There's so many cultures in that area. You know, there's a huge Chinese influence, there's Indonesian influences, there's all kind of influences. But so it's very, very hard, as far as I'm concerned, to be very specific about the history there.
Yeah, and but the thing that I would think is that obviously with more of the the Asian martial arts, especially let's say Chinese and Japanese, is that maybe it doesn't have quite the same fluidity that the Filipino martial arts has. No, I mean, because when you look at obviously some of the stick fighting and the Silat and Kali, it's very fluid, and it's it's kind of like more akin to how the human body moves. Whereas, we were mentioning there with karate, and some styles were more rigid. And when they used to train with the bow or the staff, it would be more rigid movements, and linear, not so much as like the Filipino ones.
Yeah, that's where people. I can't understand why people don't find the history of the system they do so interesting, because a lot of these, like from my years in kung fu, depending, if you came from the wide open plains up near Mongolia, it was like massive big movements, big sweeping kicks, jumping kicks, crazy
Yeah,
stuff, because they were like wild men or wild countrymen. Whereas when you went
yeah,
down to the south of China, it was more swampy, it was more densely populated. Things like Wing Chun couldn't be big because the terrain didn't suit it, the density of the
yes,
population didn't suit it. And that applies to many martial arts. Thai martial arts came from the battlefield, it came directly from Krabi Kabong, and just they couldn't practice weapons without getting injured. So that's how Muay Thai eventually came along. So the history of how, like, any true martial art evolved from the battlefield. Um, even
yes,
even as you said yourself with Japanese martial arts, I remember one person I trained with told me that originally jiu-jitsu was the art, but jiu-jitsu in the old days was a combination of karate, judo, aikido, and the whole thing was encompassed as jiu-jitsu. But they didn't want to be teaching something so deadly when feudal times ended to one person, so they separated them. You become
yeah,
the karate, you become the judo, and that's how they diversified. But the actual martial art as such would have been jiu-jitsu. That's where sai and tanfa and bo combined with the grappling, the striking, the throwing, the locks of aikido. All
yeah,
those would have been the one art originally. But obviously, in some ways, as we evolve and become more civilized, things get watered down, which isn't always necessarily a good
yeah.
thing.
No, because it's like I remember, when you'd be learning katas and stuff, and it doesn't matter if you're learning patterns in taekwondo or forms in kung fu. I mean, the thing is, these katas and forms come from a traditional place, and they were basically people practicing moves that they would use on the battleground. And the thing was, if you get a practitioner of any martial art that's doing a kata or a form now, effectiveness of their moves would be completely different to thousands of years ago of that warrior who did the kata, because he was going out onto the battleground and he was utilizing those moves and turning them into things that could save his life or kill him if he did them wrong you know
Martial arts originally was a
yeah,
vocation. It was a full time study, and people think they do 2 nights of 2 1 hour classes a week, and they think, yeah, I'm a trained martial artist. It's so watered down.
yeah. I mean, that's what it is. Nowadays the quick path probably for a lot of younger people who want to get into martial arts is kind of getting into MMA, because they feel like, okay, I can learn how to do these things effectively because they're putting me into a situation where I have to fight. But all those years of drilling punches and kicks and on the makiwara and the punching pads and the bag and everything, they're what build up your strength and your speed. But so the thing is, I think for a lot of younger people, when they get to a certain stage in their MMA career, they probably will think, okay, maybe I need to go back and learn a bit more Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. Maybe I need to learn more striking techniques. It's inevitable, no?
I think you made a very valid point there as well. Just even in mentioning the Makiwara, Like if you look at nowadays, you ask a guy in a karate class, "Hey, I want you to punch that for 5 minutes." He's probably going to go, "I'm not coming back here again." You know,
Yeah.
like I had a student that trained in Thailand, and he asked me some for advice when he went over there on what to do. And I said, look, if they say to you, get in the corner and stand on your head, just do it. I said, a lot of the times they're seeing what your personality is like. And Thailand is called the land of smiles for a reason. They're lovely, friendly people. They'll never offend you. Very, very rare for it to happen. But you can piss them off and not even realize it. And it's important to know a bit about the culture. So I said, a lot of the time they're going to just check people out and see what they're like. So I said to him, if he tells you to do something, just do it. And the guy said he was walking up and down, literally just in a stance, walk forward, 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 walk back, back, back. And he was doing this for
Yeah.
about 40 minutes. And he said there was a guy from Kerry that had been in the camp for 5 months. And they'd tell him, start in the bag. And, when they're ready, they'll call you over. But he'd be on it for maybe like a minute, minute and a half. And he'd be looking around going, Jesus, why am I doing something else? And he might pick up a skipping rope. But Mike just did exactly as they were told. So the first day was 40 minutes just walking up and down. Now, he had fights at the stage. He'd over 20 fights, but he just did as he was told. And within 2 weeks, the, the, the Thai instructor that was in the camp was teaching him his own Muay crew. And this guy from Kerry was going, what the hell's going on there, boy? He says, I'm here for 6 months. They've never shown me anything like that. But again, he'd just walk
Yeah.
away when he'd be told to do something. Whereas if they said, 20 minutes on the bag, don't come off it, Mike would just do it. He'd put his head down and he'd work away. And, you know, people don't understand that. I've given you the money, show me everything you have, you know. I come across it occasionally, people,
Yeah.
that come in, they pay their fees and go, like, show me what you've got. And I'm kind of going, it doesn't work like that.
I think that's the thing about it is it's hard for instructors because you get some people come in and they want just like, okay, teach me everything you know and show me what can help me, and I need this, or I want to go into MMA and I want to get a good grounding in kung fu or whatever. And as you said, it doesn't work like that. I can't make you into a ninja overnight and so on. And even after years of training, we don't specialize in any particular area that's going to make you as effective as you feel you're going to be. Because, like you said, the thing about it is nowadays for martial arts, it's more watered down, and it's not through fault of the instructors, it's through faults of the systems and sports stuff and everything. So, you know, you kind of say, you can look at some martial arts and say, yeah, there's two systems. There's the sports system, and then there's like the whole self-defense and true fighting style of that. And I suppose it's a bit like the Krabi Kragong, the traditional Muay Thai is probably a very different system to the Muay Thai sport, no?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you see, this is where people don't realize that without that background and where things have come from, you're missing links. You know, everything it's martial for a reason. Like I keep saying to people, why do we have to line up in a certain way? And a lot of that is just the discipline. It was military, it was martial. Um, a lot of it comes from even like you held lines. If you look at the way the Greeks used to fight, everyone knows about the phalanx. And if one guy was out of place, that line collapsed. So it was important that everyone moves together at the same time, all as a single unit. So when you're lined up in classes, a lot of the reason for that is to adopt the old, still military discipline, but also that you're moving as a unit. Um, and a lot of people, a lot of martial arts don't do that. Like I get so many questions about fighting multiple opponents, but yet the guys train in systems where they never train as a group. We train as a group regular in Sayoc Kali. We train as one guy on his own against two or three. We train as two guys fighting four. Not, I don't actually mean sparring. I mean moving as a unit, because each person is a important component of that. And if they don't move correctly, the whole thing collapses.
Yeah. And like the discipline is such a huge part of anything, whether it be rugby, whether it be martial arts. I mean, we can laugh when we look at the Karate Kid now with Mr. Miyagi and the wax on, wax off. But really, what he was doing was seeing did Daniel's son have the capacity to to stick at something and to see what the outcome would be if he put a bit of discipline to it. That was all it was, because it was kind of like disguising technique in everyday moves and tasks, sanding and painting. But as you said, it's like if the Thai instructors are saying to the students in Thailand, stand in that corner and punch the wall for a minute and, build up your strength or whatever. There's a reason. They're doing it for a reason.
And it's a thing that's sad. That I mean, I've noticed it in rugby. I've noticed it in a lot of coaching that discipline is just gone. I was dreadful as a rugby coach. I'd say the kids hated me. I said I don't care. I said you're going to do what I say, not because I'm right, but because that's how we're doing things. If you don't like it, tough luck. We obviously the highlight for most kids is the rugby game at the end. Like go through all the drills, that boring crap. Let's get and play. So I'd be the referee, and I was dreadful. And like I said to them, above any other sport, especially rugby. So one of them would say, "What was that for?" 10 yards, and move the team forward 10 yards. What the hell? Another 10 yards. Next minute, if they kept coming, all right, they've scored a try. Now you have to kick off again. They hated me, but I thought, guys, you've no discipline. I said, if you were on that pitch and you mouth back to a referee, you could cost us a game because they could get a penalty try or they could get a penalty 10 yards closer, and that cost you the game. It says, above anything else, it says, grit your teeth, bite your tongue, and just put up with it. I said, I'm not saying you have to agree with the referee, but you never open your mouth. And, even just in something as disciplined as you'd normally say as rugby, it was amazing to see these kids thinking they could mouth off and complain and bitch and moan. And unfortunately, it's prevalent throughout society.
Yeah, see, probably nowadays what the problem is as well, there's too much choice. So it's kind of like if, years ago when we'd watch RT1 and RT2, if RT1 was bad, you'd go to RT2. And if that was bad, you'd hope the other thing had finished in RT1. So, but nowadays you've 50 million channels. And the problem is maybe for kids learning martial arts, if they feel the instructor is too tough in the judo class, they go to another style. And maybe there's too many things to choose from. And the problem is you don't just knuckle down and say, okay, I'm going to stick at this and I'll win out in the end, no?
And as you alluded to earlier, I'm always in favour of people going and train with other guys, improve their skill sets. But if you're a fighter, if you're training in kickboxing, you're doing a bit of Thai boxing with me, you're doing a bit of MMA, and you go to a boxing club as well, where does your loyalty lie? You're in 4 different clubs. That's fine. That's great. If you just want to train, I 100% approve of that. But if you want to fight and compete, where does your loyalty lie? The boxing coach and the Thai coach get you fight at the same time. Who are you going to give preference to? And for the other guys you train with, I keep saying to people, like, what we do is an individual sport, most definitely. But no matter who you are, no matter what fighter you are, there's a whole team behind you, not just your coach. But what people forget is the people you train with help you to get where you are. And, you need them. They're the ones that make you great. They're the ones that spar. They're the ones that are there for you when you need the sparring. And they're the ones that motivate you at times. So, it's very much a team event. And that's why loyalty to me is really, really important. It's probably one of the most important attributes of martial arts, because it's not just to the guy that's teaching you, it's to the people that you're working with as well, because sometimes it's their turn and you need to be there for them as well.
Yeah, and I think what it is like that, you can try out different clubs and try different styles and everything, but then you have to eventually kind of make a decision and say, well, this is what I'd like to do. Because the thing is, if you're training one night a week in 5 different styles, you're probably going to be pretty okay, but it's maybe better to invest 3 nights in one style. You know what I mean? So the more time you can give to one club and one style, you'll do better in the end, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So Dave, tell me, when for you travel wise, because obviously with the with the Silat and the Kali and everything, you travel a lot more now and you go to more events and conferences. How is that for you? And has that been curtailed a lot this year, obviously because of the bans and restrictions?
Oh yeah, it's been dreadful because we last year straight away we would have had it's hard to keep up with it all, being involved in so many different things, but we would have had priority would be our summer camp in the US, which gives us access to some phenomenal instructors as well as other brothers and sisters that we train with, you know, you get the chance to train with top level people. And then we'd also have a European summer camp that's in Warwick. So both of those didn't happen. Zoom made up for that in a lot of ways. We did have a Zoom summer camp, which was brilliant, and we have a winter camp coming up in 2 weeks' time. With Muay Thai, we wouldn't, unless you attend the World Championships, which for me is just, I can't afford that on top of the other two trips. The Congress takes place while the World Championships are going on, but this year there was no World Championships because obviously of COVID. So they did have a conference that was held over Zoom. So I got to be there, whereas when I wouldn't normally get to be at that conference. So there's ups and downs to it. There's the fact that they didn't take place, but there's also the fact that I was able to be part of the Zoom calls with each of those. But hopefully this year now we just have to see what lies ahead. But it also brings up a good point when you say that, Simon. There's people that are kind of going, well, you know, I can't train over Zoom. So what does that mean? If this pandemic lasts for another year, does that mean you're just going to sit and wait for it to happen? You know, are you going to, you know, training over Zoom isn't ideal, but, you know, it is training. You're getting something done. It's keeping your interest in what you practice, and it's getting you learning stuff. And I certainly learned over Zoom. I learned loads over Zoom over the past year. But people that kind of go, well, you know, I'll come back to it when it's back to normal.
Yeah, my argument against that would be, like I said to you earlier, when I wanted to get into martial arts, but you know, didn't have the capacity or where there was clubs or anything. I just started looking at books, and it's amazing. Even looking at pictures of a guy doing a move, and you see picture A, picture B, picture C. If you can learn from a book, Zoom is a lot more beneficial. No.
I have one friend that's closed his club completely and is just teaching over Zoom now because he made a valid point. He said out of 10 months last year, he trained for 4 weeks, but he had to pay rent for all those months that he couldn't do anything. So he just closed the gym and now he just teaches over Zoom.
Yeah. How just going on the Zoom thing? Because obviously the instructor can show the moves and, you know, do the warm and all up and all of that kind of stuff. But what happens then so much when you have like the sparring? Do you try and put some students together on a Zoom, or is everybody separate?
Um, it depends. Now, I'll be very honest. My Muay Thai Zoom classes were very, very limited. Not many people wanted to do it. So in the end, I didn't resume them in December. We ran them during the second lockdown, and you know those mixed numbers normally very small. Um, you know, when people have a preconceived notion of what it's going to be all about, you can't show them what you can do over Zoom. So, you know, it was their opportunity. They missed out. But it like there were people who would say that you could have two people renting a house together. They'd have been ideally set up. They could do pads. They could do whatever they want. Sometimes it was a family. I've a mum and a couple of kids. I have a few mums with kids that train with them. So like they could have done a little bit more. And they did train, funnily enough. But they can do a little bit more. But obviously, contact is just something you can't do.
Yeah.
Unless there, as I said, there's two of them in a house together. And even that has to be kind of strictly watched. Not everyone can do that. Vast majority of people are on their own, so they can't do any kind of contact training. But it doesn't mean their learning has to stop. They can still learn loads.
No, and you know, I suppose the great thing is now, you know, with the, it's like I've been here 7 years and I've never really trained in any martial art, but I always kind of do work on the bag, and I still go over my techniques and my stuff, and you know, if you have a good punch bag, you can still get a workout. Now, saying that, I need it right now, I need to get back in shape, but the thing is, when you have a bag, you can do that, and maybe over Zoom, people can do a good session on the bag with the instructor shouting out the hits and the crosses and so on. So there's still options, no?
Oh yeah, there's loads of options, and there's so many resources out there as well. Damien Trainer from K-Star Gym in Birmingham has tons of stuff on Facebook. He has his own website. He has a couple of videos, and you know, I think he's one full section on bag work alone, and I mean the stuff the guy puts up is phenomenal. It's really really good.
Yeah. And I think so, yeah, because now, obviously with the way things are going, like if you look at people on the Peloton and these home exercise bikes and everything, and now you have this new Apple Fitness and everything, and they probably have only limited stuff like boxing and Zumba and yoga, but over time you will see more things getting added to them, and maybe martial arts instructors will say, I'm going to embrace this fitness app and I'm going to try and have my style on it, and I'm going to, teach people at home, because the unfortunate thing is we are moving into a very virtual world. And like you said, that point you made about the instructors having to pay rent for a whole year, and they're only having so many classes a week, and maybe they're going, why don't I just teach from home?
Absolutely. I'm fortunate. We have a great landlord. He understands the fact that we don't have training, we're not getting charged rent, but that's not the case for everybody. And some people have found it really difficult. Funnily enough, Simon, in Galway, there's been quite a few gyms closed, and I know that there's definitely one or two. And I mean, I don't mean commercial gyms per se, I mean martial arts clubs. And I know that there's definitely one or two that aren't going to reopen, which is sad in a lot of ways. But
Yeah.
and I've read of others, people that were two different gyms that were full time premises, one 15 years and one 20 years, and they closed. They couldn't pay the rent, and the guy said, "Well, I'll get someone else in if you don't want to pay," even after 15 or 20 years, and they just had no option but to close. So unfortunately, I think we will see more of that because the economic downturn with all of this COVID is yet to hit properly.
Yeah. So listen, let's obviously in a perfect world, and if things were back to normal, give us a rundown of what kind of nights you do training and stuff. So for anybody out there who's interested, like you're the gym you have now is in Lisbon, isn't it?
That's right.
How long have you been in Lisbon? Is that because obviously when I trained with you, and for lots of people trained with you over the years, they were in the church in St Patrick's Church, there wasn't it? Or and when did you move out of that?
It's a funny question, Simon, because I thought we were trying to work out how long we are in Lisbon, and I was kind of under the impression we're 6 or 7 years. We've been in two different venues in Lisbon, and in total, we're probably 15 years in Lisbon. I would have said 7 or 8. So, like, I kind of, whoa, where the hell did the time go? We were in the first premises for about 3 or 4 years, and we just couldn't afford it. It was smaller, way, way smaller than the place we have now, and it was more expensive. That's what was crazy. And it was the back, so it wasn't great. So we moved over to this premises now, and we're there for about 15 years. And I can't believe the time has went so fast, but it's our own place, so we were able to do lots with it, and we've chopped and changed it. It's always a work in progress, I suppose. We had a ring, we took out the ring. We had half a dozen bags. Now we've 10 bags. It's fully matted and things like that. We've dressing rooms and things like that. So it's an ongoing process. It's going on all the time. But the funny thing is, when we did make the choice to move, um, we were tired of having to share St. Pat's. St. Pat's was great. It was so central. But like the downside was it wasn't clean. It was dirty. It was being used by lots of other different groups. And when we decided to make the move, we did. And I think within the 18 months of us moving, the building was condemned and it was closed down, and it hasn't opened since. It's just sitting there derelict.
Yeah, it's a very old building, wasn't it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so in Lisbon, where is it in Lisbon? Is it like is it near which side of Lisbon is it in? The gym. Yes.
Well, we'll say golf style is on one corner, and there's a laneway on the other side. We're down in that laneway. What you may remember is it used to be the old SDS parcel place, which on Post had.
Oh, okay, I think I do. Yeah, yeah.
So the only downside to that is those buildings always came with a huge ceiling. So the problem is it was great for putting in an upstairs. So all the downstairs is a training area, we the lads put in, Mike Harty and Gary Harty helped me put in a full upstairs with a male and a female change room and an office. But the downside to that is it's impossible to heat. There's a roller shutter door in it, and with the high ceiling, no matter what you do, the heat's just going to rise. So you have lovely warm dressing rooms, and the downstairs is quite cold.
So come here, listen. We're gonna finish up with you, but it's been great chatting with you. And the one question I want to ask you, for Dave, for the amount of things you've done, and the challenges you've faced, and the ambitious, you've been very ambitious with martial arts and wanted to explore every area of it. And I mean, I think that's brilliant. And it's you've opened up your own mind as well as all your other students' minds to all these things. But what kind of other ambitions do you have when it comes to martial arts and life in general for yourself?
That's a really good question. Martial arts, I'm just happy to keep training in Muay Thai and Sayoc. Sayoc is just ongoing. I don't ever see an ending in sight with Sayoc. It's a constant evolution of training. The training never stops. It's always ongoing. It reminds me of when we did kung fu. People look at the yin yang symbol and they think it's a static symbol. What they don't realize is the white is chasing the black, and the black is chasing the white. So
Yeah.
it's constantly evolving. It's not dead. It's not a flat sign that sits on the table. It's moving, and that's the way it is with my Sayoc training. And I enjoy Muay Thai so much. I just like passing on the knowledge that I have to people. I love watching people fight. To be honest, if I was physically capable, I'd love to fight in the morning. Much as pain as you might endure, I think it's something that never leaves you. You always want to fight. The hard part, which I found, which some of my students now have found, is when the competing stops. Where it all goes. That can be hard to live with. Um, Not having that competitive outlook. But I'm fortunate in that I have Sayoc, and it's kind of made me think less of the sporting side personally for me. In terms of life, no massive goals. Just to kind of, I suppose, priority in my life is my fiance and my 5-year-old. He's he's like only starting out in his life, so I want to be there as a good guide and influence for him.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you have so much to teach him, and he has a great, he'll have a great father and a great instructor, and no matter about, because this is the thing, you as a parent, you pass on all of these things you learn. And obviously, if you're a teacher of any sort, whether it's martial arts or languages or anything or music or whatever it is, it's great that you can have that knowledge to pass on to other people.
And I think the other thing, I'm just looking at all the wall hangings behind you, Simon, and it's bringing me back to the fact that this pandemic really hit home. I have two Harleys, and I just don't get out in them enough. So I'm determined to do a couple of trips. I miss getting on the bike so much. That's probably the hardest part the last 2 weeks has been off and not being able to get on the bike.
Yeah, because you've been into biking for years and everything, so it must be a bit tricky at the moment, no? Get because were you in Riverside MC, or you're with one of the bike clubs, were you in town, or no?
I,
Or
I
no?
was I was in the tribes for a few years, and I drifted out of bikes for about 8 or 9 years because once I built a house, the money just seemed to be draining everything. So the bikes eventually went, and about 7 or 8 years ago, I managed to finally, after all the years of biking, finally managed to get a Harley. So that was awesome, and I
Wow.
had that for a few years, and I decided I needed a bike for the winter. I didn't want to ruin the Harley, so I bought a BMW F650 because for the bad roads where we live, you'd go over potholes, you wouldn't even feel it. But for a winter
Yeah.
bike, I used to get drenched on it, absolutely soaked. So I thought, nah, I'm getting rid of this. So I just got a big Harley with a screen and boxes, a big bagger, an electric light, and so now I have two of them. So really fortunate with that.
Wow. And I'm sure, like me, I just finished watching all of the Ewan McGregor Long Way Up, Long Way Down series. I don't know if you saw the last one, up with the electric Harleys, and it was really interesting. I mean, it's a different concept having electric bikes, but I suppose it's the future. But interesting shows. I mean, the fact that it shows the harsh side of biking, and especially long distances. No.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So listen, Dave. Thanks very much. I appreciate you coming on. As I said, I want to commend you on all your work, and I've always thought you've been a fabulous instructor, and I think there's so many people in Galway and around Ireland, and can attest to how good of an instructor you are, and to the knowledge you've passed on to them. So on their behalf, I'd like to say thank you. And as I said to you earlier, I think you're an ambassador for Galway. And because sometimes people say to me, "Why do you want me on your show? Like, what? I'm just a martial arts instructor." But the way I try and do this show, I try to have people I feel who are important to society and who have given stuff. It's not about being famous or being a celebrity. It's about what you've given to society. And in my eyes, I always look back and I think, geez, Dave Joyce, sound guy, and he's given a lot to Galway. And he's, whether it's through your rugby or through your martial arts, but you've influenced a lot of young lives as well, and hopefully helped them onto better paths. So I want to say well done on that and commend you. And thanks very much for coming on the show and sharing your story. And, we might have you on again sometime. We can have a more in-depth talk about the world that is martial arts and everything. So it's been really interesting, and I want to say thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure.
Simon, thanks a million for the kind words. They're really, really appreciated, and it was great to catch up with you and really enjoyed it.
Great. And what we'll do is, we'll let everybody know when the podcast goes out. It'll be going out on Friday. We'll let them know about your current training and what's happening and whatever, and hopefully what will be happening in the future. And we'll point them towards the club, and they can, find out, and hopefully you'll get back training the way you want to train soon and everything. But in the meantime, look after yourself. And obviously you and Jerry having COVID, we hope you take care and mind yourself. And we will talk to you soon, okay?
Great, Simon. Thanks a million. Take care, Simon.
That was Mr. Dave Joyce from Dave Joyce Martial Arts. And I want to thank Dave for coming on the show. It was a very interesting conversation. It brought me back a little as well to when I used to do martial arts. And we thank you, Dave, and keep up the good work. And we hope yourself and your partner Jerry get better soon, and COVID doesn't take too much out of you. Thank you, Dave. So let's talk about next week's guest, who's going to be very interesting. So next week's guest is Katie Grabowski. Katie Grabowski is the Colorado MUFON State Director Investigator. So MUFON, in case you don't know, is the Mutual UFO Network. So Katie is going to talk to us about her life and experience so far working with MUFON, and she's going to talk to us about her new book called Letters of Love and Light. Letters of Love and Light is over 4 decades of UFO experiences, and people talk to her and tell her their experiences in letters and everything. So a very interesting book, and we're going to talk to Katie, and she's going to let us know everything and going to educate us a little about the phenomena of UFOs and all the work that MUFON does. So that's going to be a very interesting conversation, and we hope you join us. And until then, take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.